All right, we're back on the Press Box podcast, and today is episode number 87. And in today's episode, we're going to have part two of our Major League Ballpark tour. We talked about the National League ballparks that we've been to in a previous episode, and we're going to round it out today with all the American League parks we've been to. Actually, been to a lot more National League parks than American League, so it'll be interesting to kind of compare and contrast some of those, some of our experiences as a family and individually at these American League parks. And before we get to that, we want to say, as always, follow us at PressBoxPod on Twitter. You know, the Major League ballparks I know are popular spots to visit throughout the summer for families on vacation. So if you've been to one of the ones we've talked about or one of the ones we haven't talked about, we want to hear your thoughts on Twitter, as well, because like I said, it always brings up a lot of good discussions about America's pastime. So without further ado, let's get into this episode of American League MLB stadiums.
All right, welcome back to the Press Box Podcast. This is episode number 87, if you're counting at home. Hi, I'm your co-host, Ralph Miranda. I'll be joined by my other co-host, Joseph Miranda, and our producer, Nathan Miranda, shortly. Today, we're going to finish our Major League Baseball stadium tour. If you remember a couple episodes ago, or a few episodes ago, we did our National League tour of the stadiums we had been to, our impressions of them, what we liked, what we didn't like. And today, we're going to finish that up with the American League. Before we do get started, though, I want to remind you again of our Press Box Podcast Twitter account. That's at Press Box Pod. We've been trying to tweet a little more often lately. We'd love to have your interaction. You know, don't feel like you don't have to respond to any of those tweets or give us your impressions of them. We'd love to have it. Remember our YouTube channel, the Press Box Podcast YouTube channel. Our producer, Nathan Miranda, has done an excellent job of putting up all the episodes up there with selected quotes and selected snippets from those episodes. So we hope you've enjoyed the podcast so far. We've had two really good guests previously. We had Barry Murphy a few weeks ago, Irish swimmer from the Olympics, and of course, Anthony Familietti. Anthony was a track star with the United States Olympic team for a couple of Olympics. So we're going to try to do more of that for you as well. So welcome Joseph in, and we've got Nathan here. So let's start with the American League. Tampa Bay is currently in first place in the American League East, so we'll start with that. Joseph, we went to Tampa Stadium. You've been there more than once, but we went there back many years ago as a family.
Yeah, so that was, I think, 2000-ish.
Right.
And I went again in 2016, and it's changed kind of quite a bit over the years. It used to be just AstroTurf, and every stadium changes, I guess, from when it originally opens. But they've tried to make it as nice as they can now.
Right.
They have, I don't know, the colors are different. It's still the same stadium because it's a dome. There's only so much you can do. The colors are different, and they've taken some of the top seats out in the very, very upper top, kind of make it more like a smaller, intimate feel to it. I don't hate it, honestly. Like, it gets a bad rap as one of the worst parks in the league, and it's not like great, but it's not terrible either. Like, it's fine. Like, it's kind of unique. It's actually in St. Petersburg.
Right.
It's not in Tampa. So I know they always talk about building a new stadium for the Rays, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon.
Probably not. No.
No. The lighting's like, it's not bad. It's like, it's not too dark. Like, I think it's a good place to watch a game. I think it gets a bad rap. I'll wrap it up with that.
Well, it's interesting to hear your impression of the 2016 visit, because when we went there in 2000, of course, Nathan was just really young, and you weren't all that old either. But they had only been a team that was their third year as a franchise, because they started in 1998. So they didn't have a tremendous fan following yet. And also, I think when we were there, if I remember correctly, they were playing the Tigers. So it was a midweek game. So obviously you wouldn't expect a tremendous amount of fans. But obviously they've got better fan support now. They've been to a couple World Series, and they've been in the league for, 23, 24 years. But the thing I remember, I don't know why it's hit me, is I remember when we pulled up to the stadium and parked, it was like we were getting out and going into a big department store, like a Home Depot or something. It just gave me that feeling of just an entrance to like a big box store for some reason, maybe because of the dome feeling. And then obviously it was a little darker to me than most stadiums. And again, it was a dome. But I remember all the little catwalks up above the under the ceiling where the people walked to do maintenance and stuff, and all the rules that they had to put in place when when balls would hit that in play. So generally, I like the stadium. Probably not one of my favorites, but it is what it is, as we say. Nathan, do you remember much at all of that trip? Or
yeah, I remember quite a bit. I remember thinking it was really neat because I remember I don't know if they have this anymore, but I remember the outside of the stadium they had this big, like larger than life sculpture of a guy like jumping the fence, like an outfielder catching the ball.
Have that. It's just they painted the uniform to update it.
Yeah, I used to have a different uniform. I like to walking up to it. They had like lanes of palm trees that you walk down to get to the stadium. I remember that was cool. Had a very Florida vibe to it. At that time, I guess I had. Well, yeah, I'm sure I've been to Florida before, but not many times. So it's kind of neat. And yeah, it was. I do remember being darker than usual in there. I have a couple of lasting memories though from I don't remember much of the game, but I have a couple of lasting memories from that stadium. Number one, I remember we got there when they were doing BP still, like we usually like to do. And I remember like we were watching the BP from we were watching the BP from some area. And then you all left. You were done. We were going to leave to go to like the gift shop or something. So you walked down the tunnel back out to the breezeway or whatever. And I like I stood there by myself for a little bit. So then I turned around to go with you, and this guy like cut me off, and like he was like, "Hey." And I was like kind of frightened, I remember initially. And then but he wanted to give me a foul ball. I was like, "You want a ball?" I was like, "Oh, thanks." And I took it. So he gave me like a BP ball that he'd gotten. But I just remember it kind of it was kind of awkward for a second because I was young, And but I remember it was cool that he gave me a ball, which was really neat. So I still have that somewhere. I remember I also bought a ball in the gift shop that was like a fake autograph ball. It wasn't really autograph. I mean, it was like a printed autograph ball of all the players on the team at that time. It's kind of cool. I also remember we tried to change. There was like nobody at the game.
Yeah.
So we tried to go down and sit like really close to the field late in the game, and some guy wouldn't let us. Like some guy that worked there. And I remember we were saying like, "There's no one here. Like, it just what's the deal? Like, it's
Yeah, I thought that was a little strange considering it was like maybe the seventh inning and there was nobody there. But I guess he was trying to be a sticker for the rules. But yeah, Tampa Bay Stadium, I mean, kind of here or there, it is what it is. And they'll probably never get a new stadium because they're not, they don't carry as much weight in Florida as, maybe some of the other teams do there. Let's move on to Boston. The Red Sox, we all went there in 2002. Joseph has been there since then. My impressions of Boston, obviously, we talked about this, I think, on the last podcast that we discussed stadiums. It is one, in my view, of the three stadiums that you need to get to if you've never been to, and that is Fenway Park, Wrigley Field, the home of the Cubs, and of course, Dodger Stadium out in Los Angeles. So Fenway, we've checked that off our list of the two. So we've got two of the three, I guess. But yeah, I just enamored by Fenway. I can't say enough good things about it. I mean, it's got that old ballpark feeling. You sit there thinking, hey, I'm sitting in the same stadium that Ted Williams played in, or Carl Yastrzemski and all those Yankee greats that played there against the Red Sox. And then of course the Green Monster. And I remember looking at the Green Monster. It looks so much smaller than it does on TV. On TV it looks like it's huge, but then you get there. I think it's only 37 feet high. Which is really not that high. It's about 12 yards, right? So it really wasn't as high as it looks on TV. But yeah, just that great old field. When we were there in 2002, I think they had not yet put up seats behind the Green Monster. So there was nothing back there. And then of course, later on, when I think we all took a tour of it back around 2000, maybe 2008, 9, somewhere in that 7, maybe. Joseph's been there late. They have seats up there now, obviously. So again, I can't say enough good things about it. Lots of different angles in the outfield, a little bit unusual format of it. Very short right field wall. Just a neat stadium.
Yeah, it's I'll start. Forget about the fact that it's old and like you said, one of the top three you need to get to. Like little intricacies of it is what make it cool. Like, like you said, a lot of stadiums now they'll build them and it's like kind of cookie cutter-ish, like 330 down the line, 4 in the center, like around semicircle outfield.
Right.
You've got like you said, the Green Monster, which not only looks higher in TV, it looks longer.
You're right.
Like it's not all that long, really, right? When you're there in person. And then the kind of higher center field wall than it just by the bullpen. And like you said, the bullpen wall all the way around the right field is just a short little wall. It comes up to your waist, maybe.
Right.
You got guys that lean over, almost fall into the bullpen, making catches, and then same in right field, and the fans can basically just reach over, and it's like not a high wall at all. And then Pesky's pole in right field, which like loops around weirdly and is like very short to home plate.
Right.
A lot of cool there. Again, with the old stadium, I've never sat in one of the seats, but you have obstructed view seats with the columns,
Right.
because it was built so long ago. And yeah, when we, like you said, when we first went, they had the 2016, they had the seats. I've never sat in the seats for a game, but we walked up there, I think, on the tour.
We did.
Yeah, so it's just like I haven't been to Wrigley yet. I'm gonna hopefully go this year soon, but I think it's probably, all things considered, for me, I put it above Dodger Stadium. I put it behind the original Yankee Stadium as one of my favorite stadiums, just for all those reasons. And then I just talked about kind of the intricacies of the park. You have all the history that happened there, and things like that. And the kind of just they built up around the stadium too, like the little streets beside it. You got the Titco sign in left field. That's like part of the kind of the the view or the aura of the park, and it's just kind of fits into the city nicely, and you can like walk there from downtown. It's just a nice overall experience.
Nathan.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've had even been to a game there, like you talked about. I was pretty young again, but I do remember it. I remember taking the tour. Obviously, everything you all said is right on. I remember I like around the stadium. They've probably done a lot better with this now, but I remember around the stadium it was cool to walk around it. Like they had nice little eating places and gift shops, and I like the outside the stadium had this cool brick kind of facade, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't really seem like you're walking. It doesn't really seem like the exterior to a stadium.
Right.
It seems like it just kind of fits into the community block or whatever. Like it's kind of weird.
Right.
I guess because it's so old. Yeah, I don't remember like huge parking lots and stuff around it either. I guess they had them, but it just seemed more like it fit into the space, into the environment more naturally than modern stadiums do. Yeah, just like everything on TV, I think looks bigger, and longer and everything. Just like Yankee Stadium looked, we'll get there, I'm sure, but that looked like it was more sprawling on TV too. It's all kind of compact in person.
Right.
I agree with Fenway Park. The monster doesn't look as tall or long in person. I guess that's partly too. Is a lot of times you see the image of it on TV, and like if a fly ball is going toward it, or they're just showing the left fielder, and it cuts off the top of the monster.
Yeah,
so it seems like it kind of like it's never ending or really tall. But when you see it all in person, it doesn't seem as tall. But I'm sure the seats are a nice touch to watch the game. I know we went up there on the tour, but I kind of like the net they used to have. That was kind of interesting. It was like It just made it seem more old school, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure the seats are a nice touch. The obstructed view is interesting too because it's so old, like you said. Sometimes some seats are behind a pole, which is kind of weird. But yeah, I like the feeling. It's like an old time baseball feeling. It feels like the golden era of baseball, which is like the 30s in my mind.
Right.
I probably put it behind Yankee Stadium. And I probably put it behind Dodger Stadium too. Maybe because I've been there more recently. Maybe my mind would change if I went back to Fenway now.
Right.
But I think I just kind of like the Southern California laid back vibe that Dodger Stadium is a part of more than I do kind of the East Coast vibe.
Yeah.
So that's part of why I put it ahead. But yeah, it's just it's obviously, like you all said, it's a place you need to go to if you're a baseball fan or sports fan in general. I think it's you need to make sure you get there at least once in your life. Because it's a great experience. So much history there. If you can do it, some of these old stadiums too, it's great. I think you need to see a game, but if you can also like pair it with the tour, I think that's really
right.
That'd be a really great experience.
Right.
Yankee Stadium, Dodger Stadium, Fenway. If you can do a tour of these places, because there's all types of history that you don't even know about that they can give you on the tour.
Right. Right.
So yeah, it's kind of my thing.
Okay, so let's save Yankee Stadium for last of this division. None of us have been to Rogers Center in Toronto, so we'll leave that one out. Baltimore, Camden Yards. We've all been there again, Nathan. We've visited these stadiums a lot of times when you were quite a bit younger, so I don't know how much you do or don't remember. But Camden Yard was kind of the prototype for all these stadiums that you're seeing today. You know, I mean, like Safeco Field and PNC Park, and all these newer type stadiums. I guess even Milwaukee Stadium. But anyway, it was kind of the prototype. It was the first ballpark, if you will, back in 1992, when they started to move away from the old traditional dual-purpose stadiums. And Camden was the first. But anyway, so I remember when we went to see the Yankees play there, and it was a really neat experience, because back then, we hadn't been to a lot of the newer ballparks, and I really remember thinking, this is kind of what baseball should be like. I mean, it shouldn't be in a big enclosed, toaster oven type stadium. It should be more, fan friendly, more close to the action. And I remember Baltimore was like that. I remember we walked there we were staying down on the harbor, and we were able to walk to the stadium. It wasn't that far of a walk, but it's in a very nice area as far as things to do and places to stay and places to eat and that sort of thing. And it's kind of like right around the intersection of a couple of interstates. So, that's pretty much my memories of Baltimore. Joseph?
Yeah. Well, one of the memories about that particular trip is the Yankees were staying.
They were, yeah.
So I remember that. And then with Baltimore too, the big thing you always think ever see is the warehouse in right field, which is not actually part of the stadium. It's technically across the street, which that street, I don't think it's really like operational for cars. I think it's got a lot of like little eating places. It's kind of like more of a walking street now, because they've kind of made it into part of the park, but that's kind of like one of the biggest like pieces of the park, but even though it's not actually the park. And I, like you said, the 70s are all about the cookie cutter stadiums. There didn't seem like there was a ton built in the 80s, and then like the early 90s started with there. But I also kind of like the old, like, I think they're still like dark green seats, which the Orioles are black and orange, and it seems like today a lot of teams want to like make their seats like kind of color of the team, like I don't know, like I feel like they built that stadium today, or they try to make them like orange or black or something. I don't know, but I kind of something about the green seats. I remember just fitting in nicely with that park. And as far as you said, it's very walkable. I like the backdrop at center field with kind of the angled, like grassy wall, as right higher wall with that little concourse out there. Overall, nice park. Probably I'd say in the upper half for me. It's not like outstanding, but it's definitely nice, and I hope the Orioles don't plan on leaving anytime soon. I don't think they are.
I don't think they are either. Yeah. Nathan, do you have any memories of that park?
I remember it. I don't know what else to add. It just I'll just give some of my personal memories, I guess. Like Joseph said, the Yankees were staying at our hotel, which was really cool. I remember there being a lot of people just hanging around the lobby of the hotel because the Yankees were there, so they got to get glimpses of the players. And I remember seeing like Randy Johnson walking through the lobby, Bernie Williams. Did we see Jeter? I don't remember.
I don't remember if we did or not. We might have seen him from a distance.
Yeah. But I just remember players just coming walking through the lobby. It was really neat. And then I remember, I guess we only went to one game there, right? Or two?
I believe one, yeah.
Yeah, that was just like that. That was, in my mind, like one of the best times in recent years with the Yankees. They had Hideki Matsui, A-Rod, Jeter, all these guys. I remember Matsui hit like a triple off the wall in one of the games we went to. I also remember, I have like lasting memories from these experiences, these older experiences, and I remember one thing in particular was late in the game. I forget if it was ninth inning or extra innings. I think it was probably the bottom of the ninth, but I had to go. I went out to go to the bathroom or something, or I don't think we were getting something to eat. I think it was going to the bathroom. I think you went with me. But while we were out, what's that guy's name? Roberts, the guy that the Orioles used to have. He's like
Brian Roberts.
Brian Roberts hit a walk-off home run, and we missed it.
I do remember that. Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah. That's good.
But yeah, it's a cool place. I like how it's close to the Ravens Stadium too. It's fairly close, so you could maybe, if you go in the fall, you can maybe see a game at each place. but yeah, it's one of those unique parks that's good to go to mostly because of that what do you call it, that place in the thing in right field with the warehouse.
Yeah. Right. Okay, let's go to the Yankees. And Nathan, we're gonna let you go first. Let's start with we've been to both stadiums, but let's start with old Yankee Stadium, the original Yankee Stadium, the house that Ruth built back in 1923. We've been there quite a bit, so I'm not going to pick out any one trip. I just want you, what are your thoughts of Yankee Stadium? And I'm interested, really, what were your initial thoughts? If you can remember back to the first time you walked into the stadium, what were your thoughts?
I remember it being really built up in my mind the first time because I obviously was very aware of the history of Yankee Stadium and the greatness of Yankee Stadium. So I remember there being being a highly anticipated trip, and really looking forward to seeing it. Seemed like it was like a little surreal, if I remember correctly, because it was Yankee Stadium. It was something that I remember. We used to always watch it for love of the game when I was growing up. That takes place at Yankee Stadium, so it just had this kind of larger than life image in my mind. I feel like I remember we first walked. I think we walked up to it from the subway stop. So we came in from kind of left field area and walked around it, I think, to the gate behind home plate. And it's just so cool. It's almost seems like a movie set or something. Like you have the train going overhead, behind the outfield.
That's right.
You have kind of the little New York kind of little food places and stuff across the street. And down the left field line kind of back there, you can't really see into the stadium until you get into the stadium. If I remember correctly, there's a high backing to the stadium at the outfield. You can't really see into it very well. So I remember walking into it. It had this old kind of feel, because it was an old stadium, obviously. But I remember walking there. They had the blue tunnels to get to your seats.
Right.
Which was just cool. So I remember walking just like this is true of any baseball stadium. This is one of the coolest experiences of it, but especially the Yankee Stadium. You walk down the tunnel, you see your first glimpse of the stadium at the light at the end of the tunnel,
right.
And you walk down and it gets bigger, and then you exit the tunnel into the stadium. It's just right. It's like towers around you. It was just so cool. I do remember thinking it looked a lot more compact in person, especially the outfield. The upper deck, the big upper decks end at down the left and right field lines, right. And then the outfield is different. So I remember the outfield just seemed more compact. I remember on TV it looks a lot more like a sprawling outfield. Right. I remember that was one thing that I really remembered. And it's just a great experience. Some of the other things we went into too that's not really part of the stadium, but it's part of the experience. What's that guy's name? They used to say now batting for the Yankees. Yeah, number 2,
Shepard,
Derek Jeter. Number 2. I think he was still doing it when we were there the first.
He was. Yeah. In fact, Derek Jeter had it taped and used it until he retired.
Right. Yeah. I think the guy was still doing it live.
He was. Yeah, he was.
Yeah, great experience.
Joseph, your thoughts?
Yeah. So, kind of like Nathan said, the compactness of the stadium was noticeable. Another thing too is how big and steep the upper deck was, the third deck. The middle one was kind of small and kind of almost even tucked underneath a little bit. Mm-hmm. Big one was just sprawling and made the stadium look bigger, I think. And when we sat out there that one game, it was very steep. If you
look like you're going to fall over.
That was cool. Yeah, and then another thing that's cool about it is it was built in 1923, but it kind of gone through a number of renovations over the years.
Right.
And you could kind of, obviously they have Monument Park out there, but you can kind of see the old skeleton of the wall, it goes deeper out there. You have the black seats in the center, which is the batter's eye, but also kind of iconic part of the stadium. And it kind of runs deeper out there, and they put the bullpens back there and left, and they have Monument Park and the flagpole was used to be in play back a long time ago, and just all the little intricacies of the history of what it used to be and all the great players that played there. And and just the short porch in right field, the Jeter always used to hit the office field home runs down. And then,
for the bat.
Yeah, right. And it's just, I think the history combined with the New York aspect of it and the greatness of the Yankees and just the the stadium itself, it's easily my number one stadium of all time. And shame on the Yankees for tearing it down. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, that's like almost a whole other episode. But I totally agree with that.
It is.
That's one of the most like. I don't know. I don't want to get into it. I don't understand how they came to that decision. I don't understand it at all. I really don't.
We can talk about that, like you said.
And I gotta get this into. And the fact that they treat their current stadium like it's the same thing, like it's Yankee Stadium, like they treat it like it's to be revered.
Right.
Why? It's like 5 years old.
Right.
I mean, just because you made it look on the outside like the original 1920 stadium looks, doesn't mean anything. It's ridiculous. Anyways.
All right, so
give your thoughts?
So I guess I don't really know where to start. I mean,
I've been to Yankee.
Go ahead. Yeah, no. I mean, I kind of
have a different.
Yeah, I have a different perspective of it because, my dad took me there in 1966 when I was 9 years old. Because I think I remember telling you all or saying on the last podcast we did that, we used to go to a lot of Mets games because the tickets were so easy to get. Yankee tickets were almost impossible to get. So somehow my dad got a hold of a couple tickets and we took the train into New York, into the Bronx. And I remember, it's funny how you remember certain things. You guys probably could say this too, but you remember certain things from your childhood. And I remember very clearly that we went to the New York Museum of History before the game. And I remember, for some reason, this sticks out in my head like I'm looking at it right now. I remember going by the spider exhibit, and there was big tarantula in a cage, in a little booth or whatever they call those things, those little holding pens. I remember that like it happened yesterday. And we went to the Museum of Art or Museum of History. Then we went to the stadium, and we sat in right field. And I remember we got there for batting practice. Back then, they used to let you in for the Yankees batting practice. Now, not many teams will let you in for home team batting practices. And I remember some Tom Tresh. I remember his name, Tom Tresh, hit a ball in batting practice, and I was about to catch it, and some guy jumped in front and caught it. Now, I don't know if I'd have caught it or not. It was coming pretty fast. But I remember that, and then also Joe Pepitone, a Yankee first baseman. He hit one out there as well that I couldn't get to. I had my glove, obviously, like every 9-year-old is going to have in the stadium. But I just remember that like it was yesterday, and they were playing the Kansas City Athletics, who eventually became the Oakland Athletics when they moved out there. And they were wearing those old uniforms which look like just the single strap type uniforms with the arms bare and their green sleeveless undershirts. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, sleeveless.
Yeah, sleeveless. That's right. And I remember watching Mickey Mantle. Mickey Mantle was still playing. He was at the end of his career, and he'd had some injuries. But I remember he got a double, and I remember thinking I've never seen a man run that fast as he ran from home plate to second base. But of course, I was 9 years old. But I remember that very, very well. And then, of course, all the times that we all went together. I do remember one time that I went up to New York to visit a friend of mine from high school. And we ended up going to the Yankee game that night. This was back in 2001. And it was the Yankees were playing the Mariners. And it was Ichiro's rookie season. And of course, the Japanese contingent there at the stadium was big, obviously, because Ichiro was on his first tour around the American League as a rookie. So I remember that. I remember seeing Anthony Munoz and what was the guy's name? The linebacker that used to play for the Youngblood, Jack Youngblood. Anthony Munoz and Jack Youngblood were in the stadium walking around. I remember seeing them. It was a great game. The Yankees lost, but it still was a great atmosphere at night going to the Yankee Stadium. And then all the times we've been there. And like you said, I mean, just Monument Park, just the numbers on the wall that have been retired for the Yankees, the great history that team has had. I remember the old timer games. We went to one old timers game, right? Ended up getting rained out, if I remember correctly, but at least we saw a little bit of it and saw some of the old timers get introduced. So, I agree with you guys. I think Yankee Stadium, there's never going to be another stadium quite like it. Partly because of it's the house that Ruth built, partly because of some of the great players that have played there in the past and even more recently, but just the aura of Yankee Stadium. And like you guys brought up, the train, the announcer, the movie For Love of the Game, just all those things go into to making Yankee Stadium, what it was. And I don't even know if we want to talk about the new stadium, do we? I mean, it's pretty much is what it is, right? Well, anyway, the new stadium, 2009 was the first year, and they won the World Series that year, the Yankees. Of course, they haven't been to the World Series since then. So I guess you can't say it's the curse of the new stadium because they did win one.
Yeah, I know what I was going to say. You said there probably never been another stadium like Yankee Stadium.
Right.
I think that's so true because from multiple levels. For there to be another stadium like that, it's going to have to be around for like 100 years.
Right.
Just about.
Right.
And so first of all, I don't think they would ever let the stadium do that again. I don't think there's going to be stadiums like Fenway or Yankee Stadium, or even Dodger Stadium, which was built in the 50s or 60s.
59. 50.
I don't think they're going to let stadiums go that long. No. They're always going to want to build a new one. But even if it does, even if you do have a stadium that's 80 years old or whatever, all the great players that played there for that team, for the Yankees.
Right.
It's not like it was like the Brewers' home stadium that's been around for 80 years with like some pretty good players, but so many all-time great baseball players played there. So many World Series games were won there. It's like you'd have to have a stadium that lasts that long. You have to have a team that is that great with that many Hall of Famers that have won that many World Series. Right. All that has to come into play to create another Yankee Stadium, which would be very hard to do.
And not even to mention, you mentioned all that, but a perfect game in the World Series was pitched on that field. I mean, that'll never happen probably again. Right. But it's hard to put it into words what Yankee Stadium is. It's kind of like Notre Dame Stadium. I don't want to get off on a football tangent, but Notre Dame Stadium was the house that Rockne built until they did all this renovation. Now it's to me, it's not even Notre Dame Stadium anymore. So it's the same thing, with Yankee Stadium. But all good points. You guys made some tremendous points. I know we all always enjoyed our trips to Yankee Stadium, probably more than most of the other trips that we took. Because we were in New York as well. Another
thing, too, is like back when we used to go to New York and Yankee Stadium was around, if you went in baseball, it felt like, well, we have to go to the Yankees game, right?
That's right.
We're in New York.
That's right.
Now it's like I feel no need to go to the new Yankee Stadium to see a baseball game.
Right.
I mean, if I'm in New York now and the Yankees are playing, it's like I don't really feel the need to go see them play. I mean, part of that's because they don't have the same guys that they had back then. Jeter's not playing A-Rod, but also part of it is it's just, you don't feel the need to go to Yankee Stadium.
Right. Okay, let's move on to the Central Division. This is going to be pretty quick. I don't think any of us have been to an Indians game. Is that right? At Cleveland?
Only the White Sox.
That's right. Detroit, no. Kansas City, no. Minnesota, no. White Sox, you and I went when you were just 6 years old. But I know you have some memories of that game. So why don't you go ahead and give them to us?
Yeah, I remember being rain delay.
Right. Long rain delay.
Yeah. And I remember, at that time it was still called Comiskey Park or Comiskey Park 2 because the original one was. Right. Yeah, but like the brick on the out, or not the brick, or like brick is just, and it's, I think it opened in the early 90s, and at that time it was like 95, 96. So
right.
It's undergone a lot of renovations kind of since then because it used to just be the big blue batter's eye out there, the blue tarp.
Right.
Which I remember seeing that, and then kind of more of a plain stadium, and then now, they've got the walls are black now and the batter's eye is all grassy, and they've it's called who knows what now, and they've kind of like, modernized a lot, but it's still the same stadium. But yeah, I just remember being kind of simple, and I remember that the big white circle at the top and the rain delay, and and Frank Thomas. That's all I remember.
No, that's about all. I remember we stayed at the Sheraton Hotel, and we had to take a train, their version of the subway, I guess, to the stadium. And I remember, the Comiskey Park, or the White Sox Stadium, is in what's considered to be the rough part of Chicago. It's on the south side. The Cubs Stadium is on the north side, which is considered to be the more affluent middle class type area, if you will. And I remember thinking, okay, it's a day game. I think it was a 1 o'clock start. So we should be out of there by 4:30, 5 o'clock, still light. We'll be able to get back to the hotel. Well, of course, we had a 3-hour rain delay. So by the time the game was over, it was dark, and I remember getting on that train, the two of us, and you were just 5 years old. And but it was a great experience, just a tremendous experience. Okay, let's go to the Western Division. Again, pretty slim pickings, just the Angels. That's right. So Nathan, I'll let you start on the Angels. I remember we went there in 2007.
Yeah.
So you should have some pretty good memories of that game.
I remember it being really hot.
Yes.
There wasn't a lot of shade in the stadium.
Right.
Well, I guess there's not a lot of shade in the stadium really, unless it's a dome. But it just seemed like you were more like exposed to the sun than other stadiums. It was hot. They were playing the Royals. It was. I just remember being like very disinterested.
Yeah, it was that. Yeah, that's how I felt. Yeah.
It was a cool stadium though. Like I like the big A, in the parking lot. I think it was a holdover from the original stadium. I think. It has that kind of unique kind of outfit with the rocks and the waterfall or whatever,
right,
which is cool. It's a nice. They have the big like hat or helmet you walk under the gate when you first go in.
Right.
I think it's a cool place. It's just I probably don't have a great view of it in my mind just because of the experience that just the personal experience of that game, that it being like really hot and like I'm just being tired.
Right.
That's not the day we were driving down there, right? Because we thought about going to the game the day we drove down, but then we decided to go to the next day's game, right?
No, I think we had set tickets.
Okay.
What now?
It wasn't the day.
Wasn't the day we drove.
No, it wasn't the day we drove down.
But
because we had the tickets.
But we were thinking about going to that game too, I think, or something.
Maybe, yeah.
But I don't really have any like defining like thing about it. I don't remember anything being particularly great, like the food or the amenities or like any particular view. I mean, like it very much looks kind of like you see on TV to me. Like there wasn't anything that struck me as like, oh, that's kind of different or whatever. It's not what I expected. It's kind of what I expected.
Right. Yeah. How about you, Joseph? Do you have kind of the same feelings about that?
Yeah, I would like to go to an evening game there sometime because I think from what I've seen on TV, I like the way the kind of sun sets on that stadium, and you got like you said the rock there, and it's kind of the defining feature. But a lot of people don't realize how old that stadium is. Like the actual stadium, I think it's the fourth oldest. It was built in like 64, 65.
I think you're right. Yeah.
It was a little more simple, but then I think they added like it was kind of a cookie cutter at one point. It had a big upper deck all the way around. The Rams played there. They played they played the All-Star game there in the 80s, and Bo Jackson hit that home run. That was
right
deep. And then I guess it was like late 90s, early 2000s. They basically tore half the stadium down and added the rocks and the carpet when the Angels moved. Then when they switched from being the California Angels to the Anaheim Angels.
Right.
And they decided to put the Los Angeles branding in there. So, the Los Angeles Anaheim. So it's kind of had like a kind of unique. I remember, it was hot that day. They were playing Kansas City. I think it was like a Wednesday noon or day game.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was like noon.
And I would like to go back sometime and I think see a night game and maybe sit a little lower with like a bigger crowd and just kind of get a different experience.
Yeah. I do remember easy in and out for those dads that are listening to the podcast. I know that's something that we all think about, but there's a lot of parking and it was easy in and out. So that's always good for when you're driving to a stadium. I want to touch on the Astros only because I've been to the Astrodome where they played at many, many, many years ago. But I went there in 1979. And I think I saw them play the Pirates, if I'm not mistaken, at that time, because the Astros were in the National League back then. And again, the Astrodome was considered one of the 8 wonders of the world when it was first built, because nobody had ever seen a stadium like that, a dome stadium. And I do remember that they tried to put grass in there, but it wouldn't grow. It would die because they couldn't. The technology in those days was not what it is today. So they couldn't get enough light into the stadium to make the grass grow.
Yeah, didn't they try to put like a glass or some type of translucent roof on it?
Yeah.
But it didn't work.
And
then they covered that up, right? It wasn't after a while.
It wouldn't work and they couldn't get the grass to grow. So they had to put turf down. And it was one of the first stadiums that had turf. So I do remember that experience. I remember it being very cookie cutter. There wasn't a whole lot of aesthetic value to it, but it was still neat to say that you've been to the Astrodome at one point or another. So that's our tour of the American League stadiums. I think we're all in agreement. We'd love to hear from you. I mean, if you're listening to this, I'm sure many of you out there this has evoked many memories of your childhood, or from if you're just in your 20s of trips that you may have taken to stadiums. Let us know. I mean, either interact with us on our YouTube channel, which is the Press Box Podcast channel, or interact with us on Twitter. We'd love to hear from you. At PressBoxPod is our Twitter account. We'd love to hear your thoughts about the stadiums that you've visited and some of the experiences that you've had there, because it brings up a lot of tremendous memories for all of us. Guys, do you have any closing thoughts on our tour of the stadiums?
No, not really. I think we covered it all. Like we said, I think Wrigley's the next one on our list at some point.
Yep.
And then, a lot more National League stadiums than American League. So
yeah. Well, we have been to a lot more National League stadiums. That's exactly right. We'll have to. The three of us will have to someday. Someday we'll have to make a little trip out west and see some of these American League stadiums that we haven't seen. Could probably hit Minnesota and Detroit pretty easily together, and then cruise down to Kansas City. We've seen the Kansas City Stadium. We just haven't been to a game there.
And we've seen the Indian Stadium. We walked up to the Indian Stadium.
Yes, we did. We actually looked in the left field fence, behind the fence up on the road part. So we have seen that. We just have not been to a game there. So we'll have to do some of that.
It's interesting that we've been to a lot more NL. I wonder why that is, because obviously it shouldn't matter about your location in the country, because there's an AL East and an NL East.
Well, that's true.
I'm in the AL. I mean, they're both. I don't think there's any more NL teams in certain parts of the country than AL teams. It should all be mixed. So I'm not sure.
Well, but if you actually think about it, I mean, let's think about the East Coast. You got Red Sox, Yankees. Of course, we've been to those, right? Phillies, Orioles. I mean, if you just look at up and down the East Coast, you're probably right. But I guess
there's 4 teams in the NL.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. That's true. So that's true.
And just for the record, I went to a Golden State Warriors game one time. I walked kind of around it to get to the Warriors arena. So
the A's Stadium.
All right.
When the Warriors played up, not their new one.
Right. I understand. Okay, so we've enjoyed having you listen to our podcast today. Remember, subscribe to the podcast. It's available on Apple Podcasts as well as Stitcher. You can listen to our podcast. Spotify as well. Thank you, Nathan. I forgot about that. So you have many avenues where you can get the podcast. The Pressbox channel, YouTube channel, tremendous content on there from some of our guests and most of all of our other podcasts. Where you can listen to some of the great clips that we've had, or some of the real interaction that we've had on there. And then, of course, at PressBoxPod, our Twitter account. Make sure you get on there and give us your thoughts on the stadium. So
we also have an Instagram page now, which is also at PressBoxPod. So you check that out too.
Okay, so that's it for the Pressbox Podcast, episode 87. And hope you enjoyed it. And we look forward to having you back next time.